Testing for sound, 1, 2, 3.
We can hear you.
Thank you.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can
Yeah.
hear you, Honorable Wesley.
Okay, great. Thank you. And you can see me fine?
We can see you, Honorable.
Visible, you visible.
What happened there now? The MK is in charge of everything here today.
It's naughty.
Tell them, Chief, tell them.
Good morning, all. I want to welcome all of you. I'm Honorable Douglas. I'll be chairing this first mini-plenary session on the virtual platform.
Recording in progress.
I'd like to welcome all of you to this mini-plenary session. There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. I thank you. Honourable members, before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the virtual mini-plenary is deemed to be in the precinct of Parliament and constitutes a meeting of the National Assembly for the debating purposes only. In addition to the rules of virtual sittings, the rules of the National Assembly, including the rules of debate, apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should equally note that anything said in the virtual platform is deemed to have been said to the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are required and requested to mute their microphones and only unmute when recognized to speak. This is because the mics are very sensitive and will pick up noise which can disturb the attention of other members and speakers. When recognized to speak, please unmute your mic, and when connectivity permits, connect to your video. Members may make use of the icons on the bar at the bottom of their screens, which is an option that allows a member to put his or her hand to raise points of order. The Secretariat will assist in alerting the chairperson to members requesting to speak. When using the virtual system, members are urged to refrain from desist from unnecessary points of order or interjections. Lastly, I wish to remind you that we are meeting in a mini plenary session, and therefore any decisions will be taken in a full plenary session of the Assembly. Now we will continue to the subject of discussion for today. The first item on the order paper is a subject for discussion in the name of Honorable the Chief Whip of the Opposition on United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, evaluating South Africa's commitment to advancing human rights and protections for Khoi, San, and African Indigenous communities in alignment with the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. The Honorable the Chief Whip of the Opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning to all honorable members and everybody else in the House. The MK Party affirms that South Africa's commitment to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the UN DRIP, must be grounded in a Pan-African identity that is both inclusive and historically just. We categorically reject the colonial era divisions that sought to fracture African unity by defining people on superficial grounds of anti-indigenous arrival or settlement patterns. The Khoi and San Aboriginal people, alongside all African indigenous communities, are rightful co-owners of this land. The colonial partition of Africa, epitomized by the Berlin Conference of 1884-1885, and apartheid's divide and conquer tactics, such as the 1950 Group Areas Act, were manufactured to cause divisions and weaken African solidarity. The renaming of the Khoi and the San tribes under the imposed label of colored in this act was designed to erode indigenous identities and fuel separation along African communities, undermining the strength needed for collective resistance. European colonial powers drew arbitrary borders across Africa, ignoring continent's rich cultural and ethnic networks, and this is evidenced by presence of Khoi and San tribes in South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and other SADC countries, completely cut off from each other to this day. Apartheid extended this agenda by categorizing African people into rigid racial and ethnic classifications, ultimately to weaken the unified opposition. By classifying the Khoi and San and Bantu-speaking groups separately under the apartheid classification system, apartheid aimed to erode our shared history and capacity for organized resistance. The divisive narrative of who arrived first is not factual. Historically, is not factual nor historically accurate. DNA science-based or DNA science-based and continues colonial thinking, in the process undermining African, Aboriginal, and indigenous communities' rightful claim to this land and perpetuating colonial ownership status quo. Science has resolved this debate by recognizing the Khoi and the San as the oldest living tribe of Aboriginal African people in this world, the oldest living First Nation community globally, and yet despite clear DNA evidence, they remain unrecognized with no rights, no land, no mineral wealth in South Africa today. Genocidal policies such as the Vermin Act enabled European settlers to hunt and displace the Khoi and the San, attempting to raise them from this land. This colonial myth that the Khoi and the San are extinct or too interbred or nearly extinct lingers today, with Khoi and San descendants often under apartheid imposed label of colored. The African National Congress, during its revolutionary phase, rightly recognized these divisive narratives as tools to weaken the African unity. And in this case, I refer you to the 2007 Strategy and Tactics document of the ANC. You will see that there's always been this clarity. Today, the MK party upholds this inclusive identity, rejecting colonial divisions and reinforcing African unity. We acknowledge the rights of the Khoi and the San kings, chiefs, and landowners, and advocate for their rightful access to land, mineral rights, and all protections under the UN DRIP for all Aboriginal and all Indigenous Africans who live in this land. South Africa's endorsement of UN DRIP is a landmark step, but true commitment to the declaration demands tangible action. The Khoi and the San, stripped of lands and rights under colonialism and apartheid, still face barriers to resources, recognition, and socio-economic inclusion. Fulfilling UN DRIP's promises requires genuine efforts to restore land, to restore lands, preserve cultural practices, and secure the socio-economic rights of all indigenous communities. The MK party stands resolute in advancing these rights. These objectives align with the United Nations 230 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, particularly SDG 10 on reducing inequalities and SDG 16 on building inclusive institutions. Addressing the needs of the Khoi, the San, and other African indigenous groups would enable South Africa to meet these targets while restoring dignity and power to communities historically marginalized by colonialism and apartheid. A decolonized understanding of indigenous identity is fundamental to achieving these goals. We must reject artificial divisions and embrace Africa's interconnected heritage while acknowledging African Aboriginal and African indigenous rights. The MK party asserts that the Khoi and the San are Aboriginal Africans, and all African indigenous communities share deep-rooted bond as Africans, transcending colonial distinctions. South Africa must move beyond formalities in its commitment to UN DRIP. It must dismantle colonial legacies and strengthen African unity by implementing elements of UN DRIP by the UN SDG deadline of 2030. In conclusion, as the MK party, we call on South Africa to uphold its duty to protect the rights of all indigenous peoples. Only by recognizing the interconnectedness.
Honorable Mane, apologies, yes. Your time has expired. Unfortunately, your time has expired, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will go to the speaker from the ANC, will be Honorable D. Khabo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. The presiding officer, honorable members of this August House, this sitting of this House is an expression of the Khoisan mantra of Ike Tsara, which means diverse people must unite. This is a call from our ancestors to build a united and a prosperous country, embracing its rich, diverse cultural heritage. Honorable members, this debate is crucial in helping us to understand the origins and contributions by the Khoisan people to the resistance against colonialism and apartheid. It also offers us a platform to confirm the historical accuracy of South Africa's complex history, thus allowing us an opportunity to correct historical fallacies. The debate on the Khoisan helps preserve their culture, language, tradition, which are essential to South Africa's diverse heritage. This debate must contribute towards reconciliation and healing by acknowledging past injustices and recognizing the Khoisan's contribution fosters reconciliation and healing among South African diverse communities. The inclusion of the Khoisan's history or story into the broader narrative of South Africa's liberation struggle promotes a more inclusive national identity. The recognition of the Khoisan's historical role can inform policies aimed at restorative justice, addressing historical injustice, and promoting social cohesion. The pre-colonial resistance includes the Khoisan and San the Khoi and San resistance to the European colonization, particularly the Dutch East Indian Company, which arrived in the land, apologies, Honorable Chair, which arrived in their land, leading to a series of wars against Dutch and later British colonizers. Despite colonial suppression, Honorable Chair, despite colonial suppression, Khoisan people maintained the cultural heritage which became a symbol of resistance. The African National Congress has a long history of advocating for the rights of the indigenous people in South Africa. Our struggle for liberation was driven by the need to address the systematic oppression and exploitation of indigenous people by the colonial and apartheid regime. The ANC advocates for social inclusive society. We note with what has been termed Khoisan revivalism, while empowering to many. Khoisan revivalism has also emboldened some to mobilize a racialized identity politics based on prior occupancy, which today extend beyond the movement. The ANC remains committed to promoting social justice, cultural preservation, and addressing the social and economic disparities faced by the indigenous communities. The post-apartheid recognition of the Khoisan includes official recognition as an indigenous people in the South African Constitution. Furthermore, the Khoisan language, Khoi, was recognized as one of the South African languages in 2019. An effort to revitalize Khoisan culture, language, and traditional knowledge continues. The South African government, in restoring human dignity to the Khoi groups, or Cape Khoi, the Namakwa, the Griqua, the Korana, the Khoiman, the Khoi, the Kui, the Kham, have vowed that human remains held in foreign museums, as well as those held in our museums and universities, must be reburied in South African soil. The Department of Sports, Arts and Culture developed a policy on restitution and repatriation of human remains and established the Restitution and Repatriation Office as part of South African Heritage Resource Agency. The RRO, or the Restitution and Repatriation Office, is responsible for implementing the process as outlined in the policy, and crucially to work with communities to develop proper ritual or spiritual processes for the reburial of the human remains. The Khoisan's role in South Africa's liberation struggle is complex, multifaceted, and ongoing. Efforts to recognize and address historical injustices continues, with a growing movement to acknowledge and celebrate Khoisan contribution. In 2007, South African voted for the adoption of the United Nations Declaration, the Rights of the Indigenous People. The declaration aims to promote and protect the rights of the indigenous people worldwide, including their rights for self-determination and autonomy, land, territory, and resource rights, cultural preservation and protection, language, education rights, and health and social service. Underpinned by the principle of restoration justice, government programs promote the preservation of cultural material and living heritage of the various Khoisan groups. This has resulted in various international awareness about indigenous rights. Empowerment of indigenous communities continue to advocate for their rights and influence national and regional policies, and provided a framework for reconciliation and redress. Under the National Legacy Project, the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture is implementing the development of Sarah Baartman Center of Remembrance that has two museums, namely Sarah Baartman Museum and the Khoi and San Museum, located within the complex and National Khoi and San Heritage Route. The Traditional and Khoisan Leadership Act of 2019 promotes recognition, empowerment, and effective governance of traditional and Khoisan communities in South Africa. This is done to provide statutory recognition of Khoisan leaders and communities, which was previously lacking. The Act facilitates the establishment of leadership structures by setting up kinship or queenship council, principal traditional council, and traditional council, Khoisan's council, and traditional sub-council to support these communities. The Act establishes national, provincial, and local houses of traditional and Khoisan leaders, which promotes the interest of traditional and Khoisan communities, and the Commission of Khoisan Matters, creating a platform to address specific needs and concerns of Khoisan communities. The role of traditional authorities play a vital role in preserving the culture of indigenous people in South Africa. Through cultural preservation, traditional authorities and practices, they preserve cultural heritage, sites, rituals, and ceremonies. Traditionally, authorities promote indigenous language and oral tradition, passing down stories, myths, and legends to younger generation, provide guidance and leadership and resolving disputes and promoting social cohesion within communities. The role of traditional authorities has been under scrutiny in relation to cultural education, representation, land and resource management, where they manage communal land and natural resources, ensuring sustainable use and preservation. Overall, traditional authorities are essential to preserving indigenous cultures in South Africa, promoting cultural diversity and heritage. Honorable members, South Africa has a rich cultural heritage, and traditional healthcare practices play a significant role in the country's healthcare system. A significant number of Africans continue to seek healthcare from traditional healthcare providers. The Traditional Healthcare Practitioners Act of 2007 recognizes and regulates traditional practices. The National Health Act of 2003 includes traditional healthcare as part of the national health system. The collaboration between traditional health practitioners and conventional health care providers is important in the continuation of care for the people with the preference for traditional health practices. Community engagement programs are important for public awareness campaigns to promote traditional healthcare and preserve traditional knowledge. The education and training on traditional medicine contributes to the research initiatives that validate traditional remedies. Sharing knowledge between National Khoi Council and commercial companies have numerous benefits for all parties involved. The collaboration with commercial companies can help document and preserve Khoi traditional knowledge, ensuring its protection and validation. The economic benefits through partnership to generate revenue streams for the council and its communities through licensing, royalties, and joint venture. The exposure to commercial best practice and technology can enhance council's administrative and management capabilities. Equally so, the commercial companies can gain access to unique indigenous knowledge to drive innovation, differentiate products, and provide a competitive edge. The collaboration with National Khoi and Sen Council demonstrates a commitment to cultural sensitivity and social responsibility. Partnership can facilitate entry into new markets, particularly in Africa, and enhance cultural understanding. By sharing knowledge and expertise, the National Khoi and Sen Council and commercial companies can create a meaningful partnership that promote cultural preservation, economic development, and growth. I thank you, Honorable Chair. I submit.
Thank you very much. The next speaker will be from the MK Party, Honorable Taibosh. Thank you. Honorable Taibosh, are you there?
I'll be there now.
Thank
Just
you.
1 second, please. This gadgets of mine. Thank you very much. Good morning, Honorable House Chair. Good morning, all honorables. The endorsement of government of the UNDRIP in 2007 was, according to my knowledge, just an endorsement. I'm not sure if it is a ratification or not. I think we need clarity on that. However, the Khoi and the San people in South Africa have suffered for a very, very long time. The endorsement by of the UNDRIP does not cover things like the land issue. The Khoi and San land problem started way before 1913. The current Land Act of 1951 does not allow for any land claims prior to 1913. This act needs to be revised to allow the Khoi and San to raise meaningful land claims. Since the Khoi and San are unable to lodge any meaningful claims, it prevents them from claiming any royalties with regard to the minerals on the land. No Khoi and San community have benefited from the minerals of this country. The displacement of the Khoi and San since 1652, when the Dutch and later the British colonizers robbed, maimed, killed, and genocided the Khoi and San for their land. The current issue of official recognition for the Traditional Khoi and San Leaders Act 3 of 2019 has been suspended by the Constitutional Court, but many of our ANC premiers choose to ignore that fact, and they keep on inaugurating kings and chiefs regardless. However, none of them are Khoi and San kings and queens and chiefs. The inequality between traditional and Khoi and San leaders in the various provinces still continues. It differs from province to province. Some traditional leaders enjoy benefits such as monthly stipends, no standard amount per month. It also varies from province to province. Some get vehicles, bakkies, housing, land, and cattle, amongst other things. I am not aware of any Khoi and San leader that's enjoying such benefits, but all the same time, there are many traditional leaders who are also not that lucky. COCTA projects, as listed on parliamentary reports, only include traditional leaders and kings and queens. There are no officially recognized kings and queens amongst the Khoi and San communities. The possibility of being locked up as a Khoi and San king or chief who uses the title king without being officially recognized by the president of the country. An official notice was sent to Khoi and San leaders that they will be locked up if they use that title without being officially recognized. The official inauguration of kings pre-elections of May 29 by premiers of different provinces, even though they do not have the authority, and the Act 3 of 2019 being suspended currently. The premier of a province does not have the right or the authority to inaugurate or recognize a king. That only lies with the president of the country, but the premiers of the provinces, continue unabated. Most Khoi and San leaders and tribal houses question the validity of the National Khoi and San Council, which is being used by COCTA to rubber stamp all the COCTA agreements and projects. This mandate expired when the Act 3 of 2019 was enacted. We have this in writing. However, COCTA still persists in using these people even after many objections and protests, and letters were written by all of 95% of Khoi and San leaders in the country. The annulment of all agreements that the NKC negotiated on behalf of the Khoi and San nation in terms of benefits to the Khoi and San for the indigenous knowledge systems like Rooibos and Bucho and Hoodia, amongst others. The NKC negotiated in bad faith on behalf of the Khoi and the San nation. They negotiated a total of 1.5% of profit sharing for the Khoi and San nation, 1.5% for the entire nation, which are millions of people, and a whopping 15% for the 21 NKC members they claim they are. As far as we know, there are only about 21 left of the original brigade. The NKC have no signed constitution. They only registered themselves recently as a legal entity when told to do so by COCTA, else they will not be recognized. Again, they are still fighting for recognition. Recently, a spate of new tribes formed in the last 3 months have received of 175,000 or 200,000 from the NKC. This is from the Rooibos money. Yet none of the original old tribes have received any funding application. The trust of this money is the Rooibos money. Is the trustees are the same people who is the NKC members who are the leaders of these various tribes that got funding. So how conflicting is that?
Honorable Taibash, your time has expired. Thank you, Honorable Taibash. Your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.
Next, we will have the Honorable Member from the Democratic Alliance, Honorable Space. Thank you, Honorable Space. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and members of the National Assembly. South Africa's progress in implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People has been a mixed bag. On the one hand, the country voted in favor of adopting the declaration in 2016, which is a significant step towards recognizing the rights of Indigenous people. However, despite this commitment, South Africa continues to face challenges in upholding the rights of its Indigenous communities, particularly the Khoi and the San people. For instance, there have been violations of their rights to access sacred sites, essential for reclaiming land and heritage that remained compromised. This highlights the need for stronger measures to protect Indigenous rights and address historical injustices. Despite progress in land restitution and economic access, South Africa's Nama and San communities remain among the poorest due to centuries-long dispossession, forced removals, and stigma. Historical trauma has eroded self-sufficient communities, perpetuating poverty. Key challenges include socioeconomically, rural areas that are neglected, lack of economic opportunities, and intergenerational cultural erosion. The South African Human Rights Commission identified many concerns, such as resettlement disputes, human rights violations, police brutality, inadequate government services, and limited access to justice. And to address these injustices, honorable members, urgent attention is required to enhance socioeconomic empowerment, preserve cultural heritage, improve healthcare access, and ensure human rights. The historical injustices faced by South Africa's First People must be acknowledged and rectified. On the 31st of May 2023, the Constitutional Court delivered a judgment that declared the Traditional Leadership and Khoi Act unconstitutional as Parliament and provincial legislatures failed to meaningfully engage with the public. The court's judgment vindicated the DA's position on the act, which we strongly opposed. The court suspended the act for a period of 24 months. The introduction of a new bill to remedy the deficiencies identified by the court is due for urgent consideration by the 7th Parliament. To date, honourable members, this bill has not been tabled. This is in direct contradiction to our country's commitment of advancing human rights and the protection of Khoi, San, and African Indigenous communities. Effective policy and legislative support are crucial. What the Botched Act teaches us is that meaningful Indigenous participation and long-term commitment in decision-making is key. Indigenous communities face marginalization and exclusion from decision-making processes. And in this regard, Khoi and San communities are still not fully recognized. The Unconstitutional Traditional and Khoi San Leadership Act made provision for the establishment of the Commission on Khoi and San Matters to deal with applications for recognition of Khoi and San communities and leaders, and makes recommendations to the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. And while the Commission was appointed in 2021 for a period of 5 years, its work has stalled following the Concord judgment. Currently, there is no formal forum to process the applications for recognition of Khoi and San leaders and communities. This was avoidable. When we evaluate South Africa's commitment to advancing human rights and protection of Khoi and San and African Indigenous communities in alignment with the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, it requires a closer look at the United Nations Declaration that emphasizes the importance of self-determination, collective rights, and the protection of Indigenous cultures. In terms of concrete actions as government, we must acknowledge the urgency of implementing the declaration. However, more needs to be done to translate this commitment into tangible outcomes for Indigenous communities. Key areas where South Africa can improve its implementation of the declaration includes the following: strengthening laws and policies to recognize and protect Indigenous peoples' rights to their lands, territories, and resources; ensuring meaningful participation and consultation with Indigenous communities and decision-making; supporting efforts to preserve Indigenous cultures, languages, and traditional knowledge. As a government, we should explore strategies such as the documentation and revitalization of the languages of our Indigenous communities. Community-based cultural centers and museums should be established in communities and be functional. This in turn will promote education and awareness programs and ensure traditional knowledge and cultural practices transfer. Cultural festivals and events should be on the annual calendar of tourism. The Department of Tourism should work hand in hand with local authorities to support community-led cultural tourism. Closer to home, honourable members, in the heart of the Gaan route in my hometown, Knysna, two visionary community leaders, Stanley Grootboom and Magdalene Moors, are spearheading a movement to reclaim and share the rich cultural heritage of our Indigenous people. Their innovative tour guiding company embodies the spirit of our ancestors and showcases the beauty of our homeland. As custodians of our stories, Stanley and Magdalene takes locals and tourists on transformative journeys beyond the surface level, delving into the heart of our culture and the soul of our land. And by supporting these initiatives, we are empowering Indigenous entrepreneurship, preserving cultural heritage, fostering community development, reclaiming our narrative, and sharing our true history. This is the story of our very own people. There are many untold stories, many Stanley and Magdalenes out there waiting to be heard. It is our duty as government to particularly involve departments such as the Department of Traditional Affairs, tourism, sports, arts and culture, and small business development to work in collaboration with all relevant stakeholders to provide the necessary support and exposure in uplifting our Indigenous communities. Let us recognize, honorable members, the significance of Indigenous storytelling and its potential to foster cultural pride, promote cross-cultural understanding, drive sustainable tourism, and empower marginalized communities. Honorable members, let us walk together on this land, listen to the stories, respect traditions, and build bridges of understanding. Let us co-create a new chapter in the story of our people. By embracing our shared heritage, we can create a brighter future, where every story is valued and every voice is heard. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be the speaker from the EFF. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to the leadership of the Economic Freedom Fighters, led by the Commander-in-Chief, CIC Julius Malema. House Chairperson, we are here today to discuss the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, evaluating South Africa's commitment to advancing human rights and protections for the Khoi, San, and African Indigenous communities in alignment with the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. In the preamble of the founding manifesto of the Economic Freedom Fighters, we locate the struggle for economic emancipation within the long resistance of African heroes and heroines who resisted against the encroachment of Euro-Western imperialist colonizing forces, thus stripping us of our human rights and dignity. This glorious resistance started with the Khoi and San people rising against the colonial violence marked by the arrival of the belligerent secular colonialists such as the Portuguese Viceroy of India, Francisco de Almeida in 1510, Jan van Riebeeck in 1652, and many other European colonizing forces that subsequently arrived and stole our land, thus subjecting indigenous African people to a state of landlessness and indignity. Today, I rise to reaffirm our commitment to upholding the principles and objectives of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and essential framework for the protection, empowerment, and respect of Indigenous communities worldwide. Though this declaration adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 2007 is grounded in the recognition of Indigenous peoples' unique histories, identities, languages, and rights to self-determination and participation in decisions that affect their lives. It is, however, an indictment on the so-called government of national unity that the majority of Indigenous African people are still landless today. Land is everything to us, Chair. House Chair, in evaluating South Africa's commitment to advancing human rights and protections for Khoi, San, and African Indigenous communities in alignment with the 2020 Sustainable Development Goals, we must ask the following questions. How will we meet the sustainable goals and protect the rights of Indigenous and African people when our people are still landless in the land of their forefathers and forebearers? How long will we suffer this indignity? How will we achieve these goals in our country with collapsing and aging infrastructure, rampant corruption, high levels of poverty, unemployment, and many other social ills? It is only through a program of expropriation of land without compensation for equal redistribution in use that we can advance human rights, restoration of human dignity, and protection for Khoi, San, and African Indigenous communities. What rights do Indigenous Africans have when they don't have place they can call home? As members of this parliament, we must restore the human dignity of our people by returning land that was stolen from back then. Honorable Chair, we have said, we have talked a lot. We have delivered statistics in these platforms, in this parliament. We have said a lot of things, but implementation, now we must have a strategy as to how do we make sure that the rights and the dignity of the Khoi, San, and Indigenous Black Africans are restored in South Africa. I thank you, Chair.
The time has expired. Thank you very much. The next speaker will be from the IFP, and this will be Honorable Hadebe. Thank you, Honorable Hadebe. You may take the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, our history of division along racial and ethnic lines is well documented. Furthermore, the consequences of those divisions remain with us 30 years after democracy. However, we now live in a new era where practices have evolved and the Constitution stands as the supreme law of the Republic. In this era, we are all regarded as equals irrespective of race, gender, class, or ethnicity, with inherent dignity and the right to have that dignity respected and protected. The importance of the Constitution is that it recognizes the rights of everyone. In assessing South Africa's commitment to advancing human rights and safeguarding Khoi, San, and African Indigenous communities, it is important to recognize that these protections are enshrined in the Bill of Rights, which requires a 2/3 majority to amend. This higher threshold reflects South Africa's alignment with the UN Declaration's principles, acknowledging past injustices and the pressing need to protect, respect, and promote these rights. Due to time constraints, the IFP cannot fully ventilate its concerns on the distinction between the Khoi, San, and African Indigenous communities. The IFP wishes to state for the record that our position is that all the Khoi, San communities are as African and Indigenous as all of us. Like us, they owe their origin to this continent. We cannot therefore support attempts to make them a group of people standing apart from other Africans in this country. The IFP support for the Traditional and Khoi San Leadership Act stems from our shared histories, representing a step forward in our ongoing struggle to fulfill the mission began by our forebears, the complete dismantling of all remnants of colonialism, apartheid, and neocolonialism. Moreover, we view it as a battle won thus far towards winning the war to restore Ubukhosi and all African forms of governance and to ensure that they are accorded treatment and respect they deserve as dictated by their indigeneity. The IFP believes that the current Minister of Culture is well equipped to advance the recognition of traditional leadership across communities with a shared history of oppression. We are confident that under his leadership, respect for these authorities will accelerate. The recent meeting he hosted, bringing together kings and queens from across the country, is a commendable step in the right direction. The preamble of the Constitution notes that we must honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country. Most importantly, believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. Perhaps umntwana wakwaPhindangene, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, put it better when he recognized that we have our own history, our own language, our own culture. But our destiny is also tied up with the destinies of other people. history has made us all South Africans. I thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Honorable A. Sauls from the PA. Honorable Sauls, you may take the floor.
Honorable Chairperson, you look very good in your traditional attire. I'm very proud. When we evaluate South Africa's commitment to advancing human rights and protections of Khoi and San and African Indigenous communities, we first want to begin by evaluating the way the subject of discussion is phrased to exclude Khoi and San as part of African Indigenous communities. It seems to imply that the evaluation is between the said communities. We would prefer the following phrasing: African Indigenous communities such as Khoi and San and others, because we are Africans in particular, not just Blacks in general. In terms of the advancement of Khoi and San rights and protections on the backdrop of the UN Declaration and 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, the South African government still has a long way to go when considering the African Indigenous San and Khoi peoples are still not formally recognized in terms of national legislation. The fact that South Africa voted in favor of adopting the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, but still did not ratify the International Labour Organization's Convention number 169, that gives recognition of indigenous and tribal peoples' aspiration to exercise control over their own institutions, ways of life, and economic development. The Constitutional Court judgment that suspended land claims for my people, that overturned the amendment of the 1994 Land Restitution Act, according to a parliamentary discussion, at the current rate, it will take 30 years at the cost of 172 billion rands for the first batch of restitution claimants to be settled. And only then will the Khoi and San be able to institute their restitution cases. As a result, the Khoi and San has many historical land claims and needs remain unaddressed and structurally neglected. Examples of such neglect: Knoflokskraal. Khoi and San people living in Knoflokskraal are treated as illegal immigrants. The Department of Forestry handed over ownership to Public Works, but has since ignored proposals by the Class Dora Royal House to solve the problem. When we consider African Indigenous people like San Queen Katrina Isu, who is used by government for heritage ceremonies, but no support is given for her school that seeks to teach an almost extinct language. When we consider that the current picture used to depict Krotoa officially is not her depiction, but the depiction of a girl, a Busman girl that was abused. We must be intentional by promoting Busman artists like Duke Jean Lanier for her work of Krotoa reimagined. Her depiction must be used as the official Krotoa image by government, and experts in our oral history like Hebre van Niekerk, whose research discovered that the picture that is currently used as Krotoa is not Krotoa. Government must do more in supporting Khoi and San entrepreneurs like the Kuna Art Institute at the Castle of Good Hope, run by a Busman young entrepreneur, Lucretia Boysen. We are confident that the current Minister of Kokda, Honorable Slabisa, will ensure that this happens, and we will work tirelessly to do this too. Ons het gelandeer op die gronde van ons voorouers. Die ding kom ruk. We are at the table now and will ensure that more decisive action are taken on behalf of the First Nation people and the rightful owners of this land in our beloved country. I thank you, Chair.
Taigan Gans, thank you very much, Honorable Sauls. The next speaker will be from Action SA, and this will be Honorable James. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, adopted in 2007, was meant to be a global framework for equality and freedom, protecting the rights of individuals everywhere. 17 years later, can we honestly say there has been significant progress? Indigenous peoples continue to face high poverty rates, limited access to education and health services, and greater exposure to crime. In my 6 months in this House, along with many South Africans, we see the work we engage in here does not translate to the people's lived realities beyond that door. The goals of the UN Declaration have yet to reach the so-called colored communities who are subjected to relentless stereotyping. So, let me be clear, colored people are not synonymous with gangs, drugs, alcohol, violence, teen pregnancy, or school dropout. This damaging narrative was deliberately constructed to exclude us from the spaces we deserve. The true intent of the UN resolution will only be realized when the government confronts the mass killings on the Cape Flats and responds with real resources, real resolve, because talk is cheap. We talk SDGs such as decent work and economic growth justice, sustainable communities, zero hunger and no poverty by 2030. I'm not sure which universe the ministers and jet-setting GNU live in, but perhaps they should take a walk in our communities like Aldo's, Regenpark, and the Cape Flats. I invite them to leave their conditioned offices, German SUVs, and take a walk with me down the bullet-riddled streets. We need decisive action to overcome historical inequalities. Our Opportunity Fund can channel investments directly into communities, while our universal basic income stimulus can lift people out of poverty and drive economic growth. These are real resources to achieve the goals of the UN resolution in line with the SDGs informed by the People's Dialogue. Action SA believes that South Africa must be a country where people's potential to thrive is based on their hard work, in a country that has opportunities for them to reach their potential regardless of the color of their skin or origin. This is why we believe in inclusive economic empowerment. Action SA envisions a South Africa for all its citizens. We must unite to restore the moral leadership that founded our democracy and stand as a beacon of human rights and freedom. The time for action is now. We cannot afford to wait another 17 years. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable James. The next speaker will be the speaker from the ACDP. Thank you. You may take the floor. ACDP. Okay, the ACDP is not here, so we'll go on to the speaker from the UDM. Is there a speaker from the UDM? No speaker from the UDM. Now it will be Rise, Honorable Ghana. Honorable Ghana, you may have the floor. Honorable Ghana, are you there? Okay, and we'll move on to ATM. Does ATM have a speaker on the matter? No speaker from ATM. Next, we will have the ANC, Honorable Makato. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will just show you my face, but I'm not going to use it. The alignment of the 2023 Sustainable Development Goals with the promotion of Indigenous rights in South Africa presents the complex challenges that encompasses the nation's historical context, current socio-economic circumstances, and African aspirations. The African National Congress produced that the alignment creates an opportunity to address enduring inequality while furthering the country's commitment to sustainable development. Indigenous people in South Africa, notably the Khoi and the San, have experienced historical marginalization and continue to advocate for recognition, land rights, and also the preservation of their cultural heritage. As South Africa endeavors to achieve the SDG, the integration of the indigenous rights within the framework has the potential to address multiple objectives concurrently, including poverty alleviation, environmental sustainability, and also social inclusion. Nevertheless, this integration prompts critical question regarding equilibrium between national development promotion, and also the specific needs and rights of indigenous communities. Honorable Chairperson, it is important that they recognize and prioritize job creation initiatives that specifically target indigenous community, as these groups often face unique challenges in the workforce. These initiatives should be designed to empower and uplift individuals within these communities through comprehensive vocational training programs. Such programs must not only provide the necessary skills to enter the workshop, but also to focus on the relevant inclusion that have the potential for growth in these areas and also in these areas. Furthermore, a strong emphasis must be placed on small business development. Supporting the establishment and growth of small businesses is essential, as it is overseas. Employment opportunities and also fosters economic independence, realizes and also sustainability within indigenous communities. It is crucial that this initiative incorporate the perspective and needs of indigenous people, ensuring that they are actively involved in the decision-making processes that affect their livelihoods. In addition to the creating job opportunities, it is vital to prioritize support for enterprises owned by the indigenous individuals. Encouraging entrepreneurship within these communities, it can lead to innovative solutions that addresses local challenges and tap into unique cultural resources. Providing access to funding, mentorship programs, and business development resources can significantly enhance the success of these entrepreneurs. This comprehensive approach aligns with sustainability development goal, which seeks to promote decent work and sustainable economic growth for all. By signing our efforts with SDG, and ANC clearly demonstrates its commitment to fostering inclusive economic development that ensures no one is left behind. It is essential that the guarantee indigenous communities have the opportunities, resources, and supported they need to not only survive but thrive in an increasingly comprehensive economic landscape. Through our consent efforts, we work towards a more equitable future for all. Honorable Chairperson, I think this is enough for the day. Thank you very much.
Kaiga Gans, thank you very much, Honorable Member. Our next speaker will be from NCC. Is there anybody from NCC? Okay, we will then look at UAT.
Honorable Speaker, you forgot Al Jamaa come before NCC.
No, Al Jamaa is later on will be after Freedom Front Plus, ma'am.
Thank you. I see we've been moved.
Yeah, no problem. I'll get you in a minute. Good parties. Anybody from Good? Okay, we'll move on to Freedom Front Plus. Honorable Boshoff, you have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I must say, reading the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples was a wonderful experience to me, although it was not the first time, but it read a lot like the election manifesto of the Freedom Front Plus. You know, it refers to communities' right to devise their own education, to have their own government structures, to even apply their own health services, to invest and into developing their own economy, to define themselves, not to be defined by some other institution or state or whatever. These are really fundamentally very important for any country where there is one or more than one ethnic group, the way South Africa in fact is. Now, if you have a lot of different ethnic groups in the country, there's always two basic ways to deal with it. The one is to recognize and accommodate it, and therefore to alter the constitutional dispensation in such a way that it is not just some dead letter somewhere in the constitution or somewhere in some declaration, but that it is the active reality of every day, that every cultural group has the right, but also the duty to look after their own identity and their own interests. The other way, which is unfortunately more common in Africa and especially in South Africa under the leadership of the ANC, is to ignore it and to repress it, except for some, as I mentioned, some cosmetic, let's say, nods of the head towards that. Now, if we look at this declaration, there is a dichotomy between the state at large, where everyone should have equal rights, and then to the indigenous community and its traditional areas, where those communities have the right to exclusivity. So we have both. We have traditional areas which are well defined, where identity is well defined, and where exclusivity is actually, and this is by the UN, recognized as a necessary part of having a peaceful accommodation of different cultures. But then, in the state at large, nobody who claims their own self-determination in their own traditional areas in that way forfeit their right in the state at large. It is complementary. It is not in opposition to each other. And that is extremely important. It's important for communities like Richtersveld, like Elim, like Taung, like Sekhukhune, but it's also very important for a community like Orania, which asserts exactly that right, exactly the right to determine our own health, our own government, our own economy, our own development in our own area, without disregarding the rights of anybody else in the state at large. Now, if you want to deal with that in a way that that cultural diversity does not create tension, you have to accommodate it. If you repress it, then you exactly create the tension one wants to go away from. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Boshoff. Next will be Honorable Sali from Al Jamar. You may now take the floor, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I hope I'm audible. Today's subject is indeed welcoming and long overdue. To more focus is needed on South Africa's commitment to advancing the human rights and protection of our Khoi and broader African indigenous communities. The United Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, adopted by South Africa in 2007, represents an international benchmark for the dignity, equality, and justice of indigenous communities. This declaration is more than symbolic. It is a framework demanding that we address historical injustices, ensure land rights, respect cultural heritage, and provide equitable access to resource and decision-making. However, translating these principles into reality for our indigenous communities requires intentional and ongoing commitment. The River Club development in Cape Town, built on land sacred to the Khoi and San at the confluence of the Black and Leesbeek rivers, has highlighted the shortcomings in our commitment to execute the rights of Khoi and San. Despite the historical and cultural significance of the site, the development proceeded with insufficient consultation with Khoi San representatives, sparking frustration and legal actions from these communities. Moreover, land restitution for Khoisan communities has been plagued by delays and inadequate support. When land claims were opened in 1994, the Khoisan were initially excluded, causing them to miss the early window for formal restitution. The struggle extends beyond land rights to environmental degradation from unchecked development and mining. In many areas, mining projects have moved forward without meaningful consultation or adequate compensation for affected indigenous communities. Furthermore, the Khoisan languages such as Nu, Nama, and many others remain endangered, although indigenous language preservation is a constitutional mandate. Khoisan languages receive minimal funding and are largely absent from the education system. This ongoing loss erodes cultural identity and deprives future generations of their heritage. South Africa has made strides, but not enough progress has been made within our indigenous communities. Finally, many Khoisan communities face social economic exclusion with limited access to basic services such as clean water, healthcare, and education. These disparities further marginalize indigenous communities, perpetuating cycles of poverty, isolation from national development programs. As legislators, we have a responsibility to support stronger policies that protect indigenous rights and to ensure these communities are central to our sustainable development goals commitments. Acknowledging their unique cultural identities, restoring access to their ancestral lands, and enhancing indigenous representation in governance should be at the forefront of our efforts. Honourable Speaker, we cannot continue to delay justice for the Khoisan and African indigenous communities. Let us renew our commitment to creating a South Africa where the rights of indigenous peoples are not merely acknowledged, but actively protected as we work together towards a more inclusive, just, and sustainable future. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sali. Next will be the Democratic Alliance. Honorable Christians, you may take the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, honorable members of the National Assembly. I am driven by a deep sense of responsibility to speak on behalf of South Africa's indigenous communities, namely the Khoi, San, Nama, and other marginalized African indigenous people. Representing their voices is not just an obligation, but an honor that carries with it centuries of untold history, pain, and resilience. These communities have endured neglect, exclusion, and cultural erasure, and today I urge us to reflect on the impact of this enduring marginalization and take meaningful action to restore their dignity and rightful place in South Africa's future. As a signatory to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, South Africa is committed to uphold Indigenous rights. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People emphasizes self-determination, cultural preservation, and security for Indigenous people to pass on their heritage. However, these rights often remain theoretical, not the action-driven principles they were meant to be. This delay in delivering justice is a profound moral failing that we cannot ignore. The UNDRIP's principles echo the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, urging us to eliminate poverty, reduce inequality, and build strong institutions for justice. Yet, the conditions faced by Indigenous communities reveal how much we have fallen short. These communities, South Africa's first inhabitants, continue to face social and economic exclusion, struggling for essentials like clean water, healthcare, and adequate housing. These inequalities result from structural marginalization imposed by colonial apartheid policies still unaddressed in our democratic era. From the Northern Cape to the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, Free State, and beyond, Indigenous communities like the Khoi, San, Nama, Griqua, and others face profound challenges. Their languages are endangered, history sidelined, and cultural contributions overlooked. Land restitution, a fundamental right, remains unresolved across these regions, depriving communities of their ancestral territories. For Indigenous people, land embodies identity, culture, and memory. Every day that passes without land ownership strips away their autonomy, denying them justice and dignity. This neglect affects not only our socio-economic well-being, but also their cultural survival, as traditional lands are vital for preserving customs, livelihoods, and ancestral connections. Consider, for example, the community of Oppermansgronde, a symbol of unfulfilled promises. Descendants of early indigenous leaders like Frederik and Adam Opperman have struggled since 1994 for the title deeds to their land. Corruption within community property associations intended to facilitate ownership has instead become a huge barrier, preventing families from claiming what is rightfully theirs. This land is not only a legal entitlement, but a deep ancestral connection that defines heritage and community. Such exclusion should be a call to action, as it violates their rights and undermines our commitment to justice and equality. In Platfontein, near Kimberley, the plight of the Sand communities is equally dire. Displaced from their original lands, they endure severe underdevelopment. Living conditions are intolerable, with families surviving amid untreated sewage and without access to clean water or basic sanitation. For these communities, democracy's promises of dignity and equality feel hollow as they live in squalor without adequate support. The Nama people of Richtersveld in Namaqualand share a similar struggle for land and cultural preservation. Despite winning a historic land claim, many still grapple with inadequate resources and limited government support to sustain their livelihoods on ancestral lands. Likewise, the Peniel community near Berkeley West, a vibrant settlement with a deep history dating back to the 1800s, continues to face challenges in securing land rights and economic opportunities. Equally important is the preservation of Indigenous languages, which are the essence of cultural identity. Endangered languages risk erasure as children are pressured to abandon their mother tongues. Preserving these languages safeguards the heritage of South Africa as a whole, requiring serious investment in language education. Honourable Chair, we need tangible action to correct these injustices. Indigenous leaders must be further supported to empower them to shape policies affecting their communities. Honourable Chair, land rights must remain at the forefront of our legislative priorities. We must accelerate land restitution to enable individual ownership, empowering Indigenous people with the freedom and responsibility that secure land rights provide. Indigenous communities should be empowered to thrive on their ancestral lands without marginalization. Leaving these rights unaddressed is a betrayal of both United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People principles and the Sustainable Development Goals for inclusive, sustainable development. Honourable Chair, to address the inequalities impacting Indigenous persons, we must work across party lines, valuing their voices to build a united South Africa. We must commit to real action, protecting land rights, fostering economic inclusion, and empowering our Indigenous communities. The future of South Africa depends on uplifting these communities in our pursuit for justice, dignity, and equality. I thank you.
Thai Gangans, thank you very much. Our next speaker will be the speaker from MK, Honorable Minchidan. Thank you very much. You may speak.
Honorable Douglas, members of the Progressive Caucus, honorable members. Honorable Chair, in 1510, some 40 years before the arrival of Jan van Riebeeck and his thugs, the Khoisan had already defeated the Portuguese colonial thieves. Today, this parliament must recognize the warrior spirit of our Khoisan ancestors, who in 1510 defeated Francisco de Almeida, who served as the viceroy to the Portuguese state. This war was the first full-scale war in defense of our land, cattle, and other natural resources. Our Khoisan ancestors set the blueprint of anti-colonial war through taking the lives of the colonialists who waged a successful war against the colonizers. So our Khoisan ancestors defeated and murdered these colonizers. This victory must be recognized by all justice-loving people. Honorable members, there has been attempts by colonial historians to disaggregate the Khoisan from the African family. This dishonest history seeks to justify colonial land theft by European colonialists to equating African immigration with colonial conquest. This revisionist history is as cruel as colonialism it seeks to defend. These colonial historians proceed through erasure of the evil deeds of the colonizers against the Khoisan. We do well to remember, honorable members, that the European settlers undertook a genocide against the Khoisan. This genocide has not been accounted for nor acknowledged. It's time that the descendants of the European colonizers both acknowledge and paid reparations for the genocide against the Khoisan. Organizations such as the Racist AfriForum are not friends of the Khoisan. They are beneficiaries of the land dispossession of the Khoisan and also beneficiaries of the genocide perpetrated on the Khoisan people. We see their colonial agenda of divide and rule. It is indeed sad and disappointing that the post-1994 government has maintained the marginalization of the Khoi San, as we see by the non-recognition of the Khoisan kings and queens. This must be corrected pronto, as this marginalization violates the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Chair, we have a duty to defend the status of the real indigenous people against being dispossessed like their land by settler colonialists. No European settler can legitimately claim to the status of being indigenous to Africa, irrespective of how long they have colonized our land. Chair, the racist enclave called Orania has no right to exist. It is established on stolen land. The inhabitants of Orania are not indigenous. They are descendants of the colonial settlers. Just like the DA, who speaks glowingly about the indigenous people, but it opposes land expropriation without compensation. Therefore, it does not serve the interests of the indigenous people that it purports to speak on behalf of. The MK calls for justice for the Khoisan by firstly recognizing that they are legitimate victims of genocide and must get reparations. Secondly, that they are part of the African land dispossessed people and their land must be returned to them without any further delays. We indeed celebrate the warrior spirit of the Khoisan ancestors who fought and defeated colonialists in defense of our land, our wealth, and our people. I thank you, Chair.
You are misguided, my friend.
Thank you very much. Please wait for me to acknowledge before you speak. I have not recognized you. Next will be the speaker from the ANC, Honorable Thambo. Please take the floor. Thank you. Honorable Thambo, are you there? From the ANC.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Thank you. House Chair and colleagues, I think we would recall that this particular subject for discussion moved by Honorable Manu follows shortly on the subject for discussion moved by Honorable Souls, looking at the issue of identity and citizenship in our country. And I think these are critical debates. But I must admit, Chair, I was quite surprised to see that the Chief Whip of MK has moved this particular topic and in terms of his input this morning, because it was the very same Honorable Manu who in 2011 said that there were too many colored people in the Western Cape. Yes, I know it's hard to believe. And then he went on further to say, referring to colored people, that they should spread in the rest of the country. So they must stop this over concentration because they are in oversupply where they are. So you must look into the country and see where you can meet the supply. So this is a very honorable Manu who moved this motion today, and in his discussion was talking about the issue of colored identity and apartheid construct. The reality is that many of the people of our country, and people identify in different ways, who had historically been labeled as colored, are in fact descendants from the Khoi and the San. So for Honorable Manyi to then say that colored people are in oversupply in the Western Cape actually negates his very attempt to say that he is concerned about the rights of the Khoi and the San. But I think it's clear that Honorable Khobo and Makgato have very clearly, from the side of the African National Congress, outlined the ANC's clear commitment to advancing the human rights and protections for the Khoi, San, and indigenous peoples of our country, in line with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And I think, colleagues, one of the critical things for us here is that there has been reference made to the Traditional and Khoi San Leadership Act, Act 3 of 2019, which this Parliament passed in the 6th administration. And we are aware also of the Constitutional Court judgment, which held that the processes involved were not adequate and basically gave 2 years for this to be corrected. I think a key task of all of us here, led by the Minister of COGTA, the Portfolio Committee, is to make sure, because time is of essence here, that this particular act, the process is followed, because in this act, which demonstrates the ANC's commitment, provision is made for the setting up of a national provincial houses for Khoi and San traditional leaders, and even going down to the level of municipalities, where a municipality such as Hessequa, for instance, can establish a local house for traditional leaders. So that is something that all of us in this debate must commit to. But I think it's also interesting to me that Honorable Taibosh, was using the speech to denigrate the Khoi San Council. I think one must be very careful about doing that, because while this legislation is still needing to be resolved in terms of the Constitutional Court, the Khoi San Council has been set up after huge amount of consultation amongst traditional Khoi and San communities and is there. I agree with him that issues such as the revenue from rooibos are issues that need to be clearly looked at so that the benefit spreads legitimately and fairly across all communities. But it doesn't help to come here and undermine the Khoi San Council, which is there, having been set up. I also find it ironic that Honorable Spies from the DA comes here and talks about the rights of the Khoi and the San, together with her colleague from the DA who spoke later, whereas in the Western Cape, we know that all other provinces since 1994 have moved to set up provincial traditional leadership houses. It was only in the Western Cape, largely dominated by the DA, that for all those years, with Helen Zille as the main culprit, actually refused to set up provincial houses for traditional leaders, which could have accommodated the Khoi and the San. We now have the National Act, and I've referred to that earlier. And it is the very same DA that wants to talk about access to land, whereas they are on record of having opposed the Expropriation Act, which has been passed by this Parliament and awaits the signature now of the President, which is a critical tool to be able to effect redress. We've had the issue of security of tenure, legislation to protect the tenure. There's been movement in regard to the restoration of rights in terms of the restitution process, but the critical element lacking is land redistribution, which some members have referred to. And we cannot have the DA, for instance, signing up to the statement of intent, which talks about redress, but at the same time being opposed to the very legislation which is going to help to actually achieve the land redistribution, which all of us know has not happened adequately in this country and needs to correct what the President of our country refers to as the original sin of land dispossession. I also want to refer members to, I think, a very profound quote by Chief Albert Luthuli, the former president of the African National Congress and a Nobel laureate, where he writes in the book, Let My People Go. In the epilogue, he says, the task is not finished. South Africa is not yet a home for all her sons and daughters. Such a home we wish to ensure From the beginning, our history has been one of ascending unities, the breaking of tribal, racial, and creedal barriers. The past cannot hope to have a life sustained by itself, wrenched from the whole. There remains before us the building of a new land, a home for men and women who are black, white, brown, from the ruins of the old narrow groups, a synthesis of the rich cultural strains which we have inherited. There remains to be achieved our integration with the rest of our continent. Somewhere ahead, writes Albert Luthuli, there beckons a civilization, a culture which will take its place in the parade of God's history, besides other great human syntheses. It will not necessarily be all black, but it will be African. And those are very significant words. And I think fundamental to this issue is a recognition from all of us. And I think it's also that we must recognize that genocide has taken place. And the reality is that with a genocide, you've destroyed communities, you've destroyed languages, land has been dispossessed, indigenous knowledge systems have literally been destroyed. And yet you have a situation where, for instance, the Freedom Front Plus comes to this debate, talks about Orania, but not once talks about the fundamental issue of redress, which is in our constitution. This debate is about the indigenous, the Khoi and the San and indigenous peoples, but the Freedom Front has the gall to come here and not even acknowledge. And I want to remind the honorable member from the Freedom Front that the provisions of redress are included in the statement of intent, which binds the government of national unity parties together. So unless the Freedom Front and others will actually deal with the issue of redress, what they say about self-determination and recognition is going to be undermined. And that's why a lot of people have no respect for the objections raised to the Bella Bill, because they're not seen as advancing education. They are seen more as to try and preserve a particular privileged access to education and to deny others. So it's time that when we have a debate like this, and I'm hoping that in the national dialogue, Chairperson, these issues of identity, citizenship, redress are actually going to be addressed in a fundamental way. But they have to be premised on the need, as our Constitution says, for redress for all those who suffered unfair discrimination. The Khoi, the San, the indigenous people of this country, Xhosa, Zulu, Sotho, have suffered. And unless all of us are going to accept that as a need to rebuild this country, we are going to fundamentally, and that's why the ANC champions the notion of building a national democratic society based on equality, based on redress, but also non-racism. To build non-racism means a commitment to redress. What we also need to understand that in terms of where we are going as a country, we need to support the apex priorities announced by our president. The issue of growing this economy inclusive. If you don't grow the economy inclusively, you don't redress the economic total exclusion that happened through colonialism and apartheid. We have to reduce the cost of living that impacts on all, especially the poor, spread across the people of our country. And thirdly, we have to deal with credible institutions that are able to deal with issues of malfeasance and corruption. And as we unite around those and we begin to deliver on these particular issues, we will see that in the process we deliver to those who have suffered unfair discrimination. In the Esekwa area, you have the fish favors, old fishing traps, which were used by the indigenous Khoi and San to trap fish. And the irony of that situation is that even though there's a reference there, a monument which says these were the fish favors, the local community in Melkotefontein are not directly involved in actually not only just celebrating the history of that indigenous knowledge of how fish were caught by the Khoi and the San, the Khoi in particular, all those years ago, are not directly involved in the possible economic beneficiation of that particular indigenous knowledge system. We have to pursue the African Renaissance, celebrate the indigenous African knowledge, acknowledge redress, and also acknowledge that that South Africa was a form of internal colonialism. We as the ANC are not rejecting those who established a colony. We fought, we've established a democracy. It is now our task to build a national identity with diversity, but understanding that redress has to be central to this. You cannot only
Honorable Thambo, your time has
redress
expired.
is the way
Thank you
that
very
we will
much.
build a united, democratic, non-racial country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The final speaker on the list today will be MK, the Honorable Chief Whip of the Opposition. Thank you, Honorable Manye. You may take the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. In conclusion, I think this discussion requires us to be blatantly honest and not try to score cheap points here like Honorable Doug Moore here. First point, Honorable Saul, to say to you that your definition of Africans in particular to include the Khoi and the San, I think from where I sit, that's what I've always understood it to be. In fact, before the ANC lost its ways, if you go again to this strategy and tactics documents 207 of the ANC, you will find that in the definition of Africans, they include the Khoi and the Sans as part of the Africans, as it were. So I think you will not find a lot of opposition from us if you said that. Number one. Number two, Honorable Boshoff, when you talk about self-determination, I want to pick everything positive from every speaker here. Honorable Boshoff, when you say something about self-determination, and I think here, I agree with you, and I think I want to ask the Khoi and the San people in this platform to really help us to self-determine as to who they really are, as it were, because we also have the Malay people here that came here as slaves, have all of a sudden they are now climbing on the bandwagon. So you must help us, whether you think they're Malay that came here as slaves, if they all of a sudden become the Khoi and the San, help us. And then we also have the mixed race issue here. I mean, if you come from Europe, you come here and you mix with Matlala from Limpopo, and the colored comes out of that arrangement. Has that person all of a sudden become a Khoi and a San? So I think the Khoi and the San must help us to make sure that their war is not hijacked, as it were. So we'll leave it to the Khoi and the San to help us define themselves properly. The DA, we heard what you are saying and all of that, but our view is very simple, that the state must own the land, and that the state must then list the land accordingly, as it were. So that's what we're saying. We're not going to continue with this privatization approach that you're talking about. Honorable Taibosh, the 1913 that you talk about, I agree with you on the 1913. That date legalizes land theft. I mean, our land was stolen way back in the 1600s, in the 1500s, and all of that. To now, all of a sudden, the Constitution to have a date of cutoff of 1913 is actually legalizing theft. So that date must go back to 1652 or somewhere there. So that we can have all the land that we got. And I think those are the main things here. And then lastly...
Thank you, Honorable. Your time has expired. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, this concludes the debate. And we will now continue on to the second debate. We will now have a new presiding officer, and Makubela will preside over the second debate. Thank you, Honorable Makubela. You may proceed.
Honorable Chair, my hand was up for a point of order.
Okay, please continue with your point of order.
Honorable Chair, I was raising a point of order on explanation in terms of the rules. I wanted to just explain to...
Which rule?
Well, you can also rise on a rule of principle, so I'm just looking for the actual rule, but it is in the rule.
What is your point of order, Honorable Source?
The rules allow me to explain a point made. I will get you the rule in a minute.
No, Chair, there's no such a rule.
I don't think there's a rule. Yeah.
There's no such a rule of principle.
Yeah. I'll make a ruling on this.
The rule book says I can raise on a point of principle if I don't know the exact rule in the rule book. But I'm trying to get it so that you know that there is such a rule.
There's no such a rule. I'm part of the rules committee. I'm telling you, there's no such a rule.
Okay. So what we'll do is we have closed the debate. The last speaker has spoken. Rule 91 deals with explanations. And so when it comes to that, I'm going to make
Rule 91.
Yes, it's Rule 91.
Rule 91, yes.
What is your point of order?
I'm rising to say that I need to explain that rule articulates that I'm able to explain a point that was misconstrued. So that's what I'm trying to do. And the honorable member before that just interjected, Chair, said that there's no such rule and there is. I was just trying to find out what the rule is. So can I explain based on a statement that I've made?
On a point of order, Chair. I
Yes,
think let's move, Chair, because there's no
Yeah.
No,
such
we can't move. It's my
you
right
can rule
to.
on a point
I'm going to make a
differently.
ruling. I'm going to make a
But
ruling.
you can't
to
want to
everybody.
explain
Yes.
and then reopen
EFF
the
is not the
debate
I
again.
will
chairperson.
rule
We
on
had
this matter.
Honorable
Guys,
Chair,
can I,
the EFF is not the chairperson here. Please take
can I
control of this
please?
debate.
Okay, guys, thank you. I'm closed the debate already. I had already said the debate is closed, Honorable Source, before you
But I
had
raised my hand virtually.
indicated.
You didn't recognize my hand
No,
virtually.
it was after I had already declared. So the rule book says that
No,
we are
I
now
raised
going
my
to
hand
the
virtually.
second. Yes,
Good
that's
afternoon.
fine.
Good
We are
morning,
going on to the
Before.
next
honorable
debate.
members. May I
Thank you.
proceed?
Chair,
You
can we
may
have your
proceed,
ruling
Honorable
first?
Chair.
Can we
Please
first have
proceed.
your
Thank you.
ruling, Chair,
Honorable
around the room?
Honorable
Increase in here when
Honorable South,
in here, please.
Honorable,
EFF is not the chair here. Don't talk to me. I'm
Honorable
talking to the
South,
chair.
We're not in some gangster arrangement here. Keep quiet.
Honorable Thambo,
This
may you
is a debate.
Honorable
The chair
South,
must speak. You are not the chair.
Honorable South,
Honorable
may
member, I
you,
will not listen to you. I'm listening to the chair.
Honorable
Are you the
South,
chairperson?
Honorable
Are you the
South,
chairperson?
yes, I am the
You are
chairperson.
not the chairperson.
Honorable South, may you please mute. Honorable members, good afternoon. We shall now proceed to the last item on the order paper, which is in the name, which is a motion in the name of Mr. Thambo. I now recognize the Honorable Thambo.
Thank you, Chairperson. House Chairperson, the advent of the pension has been a part of the natural development of labor in South Africa and has existed as the bedrock of social security for the vulnerable and elderly since the dawn of our democracy. The periods of colonial conquest and cruelty of the apartheid system had for so long doomed African people to menial labor, remuneration in food or alcohol, and rendered African people as slave laborers who could, at the behest of their employers, be dismissed at a whim and find themselves without any means to sustain themselves as they look for the next peace job. It has therefore been a painful reminder of how disregarded the life of African people is when the Financial Sector Conduct Authority released a report that there had been private security companies and local government municipalities that have been deducting money from workers' salaries for purposes of paying their pensions, only for this money not to reach their respective pension funds. As things stand today, the private security sector hosts more personnel than the South African police services, with SAPS boasting a mere 200,000 police officers, while the private security sector employs more than 600,000 security guards. This means that there are laborers who are regulated by the private sector and suffer major violations of their rights as workers because they are undereducated and exploitable. The private security sector is booming, and this boom relies on crime. There's no sphere of society where you do not encounter private security, whether it is your local ShopRite, your school, your university campus, your neighborhood, your workplace, the airport, the train station. Private security guards are a permanent feature of our lives. Even some police stations are protected by security guards, some who are heavily armed and have transferred from SAPS tactical units. The question no one ever asks is whether these human beings who are at the coalface of danger and crime have their rights protected and by whom. It is according to the FSCA that numerous private security companies owe the private security sector provident fund more than 6 billion in unpaid pensions. And local government municipalities owe numerous pension funds of municipal workers, such as the Municipal Employees Pension Fund and the Municipal Worker Pension Fund, more than 1 billion in contributions. The defaulting of these statutory contributions spans almost 20 years and is a blatant violation of Section 13A of the Pensions Fund Act. It is a wonder that the cries of these workers have fallen on deaf ears. The regulatory bodies that are meant to assist them have proven to be toothless. Many workers have died destitute and left their families in even worse conditions, yet money was deducted from their salaries on a monthly basis. As the EFF, we have raised this matter with the Department of Labor, the CCMA, bargaining councils, and even Treasury itself, and in particular raised a concern that it is highly likely that state-owned entities and government departments are contracting these delinquent private security companies, yet our cries have fallen on deaf ears. We proposed a 3-month period to allow these private security companies who have stolen workers' money to be compliant or risk the cancellation of their contracts. Treasury ignored us and decided to be complicit. We raised this alarm as early as January, and it is only now
through the advent of the two-pot system that there's a panic because workers are attempting to withdraw their monies as the law allows, but they find that the coffers of their pension funds are empty. There needs to be drastic reform in the pension fund sector, which sits as the backbone of our economy and the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And this reform cannot happen through broken telephone, which constitutes the regulatory bodies that protect workers' pensions. Pension fund administrators, asset managers, employers, both in private sector and in local government municipalities, have gambled with workers' monies in dodgy investments and for self-enrichment. And it is time that this comes to an end. A case study of this is a company known as Akani Pension Fund Administrators, which manages the pensions of more than 30,000 municipal workers across 117 local government municipalities. South Africa, like within most financial markets, has pension funds, both private and public, which hold the cumulative value of the retirement assets of employees in various sectors. These pension funds ordinarily have administrators who manage the funds, administer payouts, and so long as this is in line with the provisions within the Pensions Fund Act, they are allowed to invest the pensions of workers and develop numerous assets such as property or shareholding in industries. There are currently pension fund administrators who have misused this provision and are alleged to have sold 3 hectares of land to the Municipal Employees Pension Fund that they administer for 333 million rand, while it had bought the same amount of land for 2 million. This property is one of many that are managed by Akani and have been sold to the very pension fund they manage by its own administrator, ostensibly to accumulate profit out of the fund. The lack of independence, abuse of administrative power, and collusion has resulted in the money of workers being used for self-enrichment. This corruption needs to be uprooted. In the private security sector, companies default and steal workers' money, and when they are caught, they simply collapse these companies and open new ones and continue their corruption. The pension funds adjudicator has proven ineffective, the private security industry regulatory authority is complicit, and Treasury is suspiciously silent. It is for this reason that we as the FF call for the establishment of an ad hoc committee that will investigate and recover workers' monies. This committee must investigate all implicated local government municipalities and private security companies which have stolen workers' monies. It must interact with all relevant stakeholders, including affected workers and their families, the FSCA, labor unions, CIRA, current and former municipal managers and CFOs, pension fund administrators, bargaining councils, past and present. Of more critical importance, we must review the entire regulatory framework of the pension fund sector and explore particularly how we can centralize the administration of pension funds, particularly in municipalities, in the same manner the PIC has done, and utilize these funds for infrastructure development in municipalities instead of narrow investments by individual administrators. We must unite on this matter across party lines or risk collapsing this economy and committing human rights atrocities and condemning workers to poverty and uncertainty. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Thambo. I invite the Honorable Ngaleka Mazibuko. The Honorable Mazibuko.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Chair, I stand here as a former shop steward and a former local government practitioner who understands the struggles of workers. It is an honor for me, Chair, to remind honorable members of the importance of celebrating one of the greatest achievements of the democratic dispensation on behalf of the workers of South Africa, the addition of Section 13A to the Pension Funds Act in 1996. Workers have waged struggles for equal access to social protection through access to pension fund and old age grant access. Access to pension fund is a critical gain we should protect as part of protecting the well-being of all South Africans, particularly workers and the retired. In introducing specific requirements and timelines for employers' contributions into their employees' pension and for allowing for penalties to be levied on employers in cases of late payments, Section 13A represents one of the strongest shows of force of our human rights-centered constitutional democracy, a testament to the tireless work of the labor movement, a fitting reminder of the good that comes when the alliance that birthed our democracy works in harmony. Honorable Chair, the Pension Fund Adjudicator is an institution which exists to primarily address issues that the motion seeks to achieve through establishment of an ad hoc committee to investigate some local government municipalities and private companies found in violation of Section 13A of the Pension Fund Act. Scholars, Honorable Chair, have highlighted that the legislative history of the Pension Fund Act demonstrates that the legislature considered and understood that the effect of creating an educator with the power to issue binding decisions would create legal precedent, which would apply not only to the individual case before the adjudicator, but future cases as well. Section 13A specifies the following key obligations and provisions. Timely payment of contribution. Employers must pay both employee and employer contribution into the pension fund by the specified due date, typically within 7 days after the end of the month in which the contributions were deducted. Deductions from employees' salary is very important, and submit them to the pension fund within the same time frame. Regulatory oversight by the Ombuds Council also played a pivotal role in maintaining the effectiveness of the Ombuds system. In the 2023-24 financial year, the pension adjudicator received the registered 9,177. The pension adjudicator achieved 8,399 complaints closed, of which 77% were within 6 months. This demonstrates the extent to which matters that relate to the pension fund get addressed. However, we are concerned that a number of private sector organizations and public institutions do dishonor their commitment by deducting pension fund contributions and not paying to the pension fund, and in other circumstances, the employer does not make their contributions. This results in a risk of employees losing their benefits. This also poses a risk for other financial services such as funeral cover, which pension fund members can lose. We empathize with families who have been impacted by situations of non-payment of pension funds, and also for families impacted by non-payment of salaries, which disrupts livelihoods and the financial obligations of workers. Non-payment of salaries from the public sector and in the private sector has severe consequences, and we call on all employers to always develop financial buffers to prioritize the compensation of workers. It goes without saying, Madam Chair, that workers and employers operate in a symbiotic relationship. When employers default on their contributions, the financial health of these employers and the relationships between the employers and their stakeholders deteriorate and put the livelihoods of employees at risk. We have observed the challenges of non-payment of pension contributions in the period of the two-pot system, when workers could not direct a withdrawal because their employer had been defaulting on contributions payments. This has resulted in many households not receiving relief, which they thought they would receive as part of the employment. We call on all workers who have been unjustly impacted by the non-compliance of employers to report matters to the pension fund adjudicator. In the public service, this problem largely impacts local municipalities which are financially distressed and unable to pay salaries. This is a result of financial sustainability challenges which impact the cash flow of municipalities. To resolve this challenge, the funding model of local government should be reviewed. This problem is also largely in the private sector, where workers are not effectively organized. The existence of a union in a workplace is a critical factor in ensuring that employers comply with required legislation. The lack of organizing weakens the ability of workers to challenge unjust labor processes. Honorable Chair, the democratic dispensation also created institutional mechanisms such as the Financial Service Conduct Authority, the FSCA, to enforce the employer's obligation in terms of the law. In addition, the FSCA is empowered and required by law to assist employees to ensure that they can monitor their pension fund statements and report any discrepancies to their fund administrators or directly to the FSCA to address issues promptly. Are all mechanisms, Honorable Chair, sufficient to protect workers, the families and their communities? Are penalties, including interest on late or missed contributions, strong enough to ensure employers fulfill their duties to their employees at all times? Is it enough that even individuals, including directors and financial officers who are responsible for the management of these contributions, can be held personally liable for non-compliance? Are pension funds or trustees themselves strong enough to take legal action against non-compliant employers when it is necessary? Sadly, Chair, there are still many employers who, for whatever reason, do not fulfill their obligations for timely pension contributors. Some of the reasons for the non-compliant include general financial distress, poor trading conditions, poor financial status. In conclusion, Madam Chair, given all the above, given the importance of the pension system for the social protection of workers in South Africa, and given the strong institutions that are placed to tackle the problem, the African National Congress does not support the motion to establish ad hoc committee to investigate violations of Section 13A of Pension Fund Act. Instead, the African National Congress calls upon the House to focus on existing structures and institutions, enforcing accountability where necessary and providing support where needed. The Finance Standing Committee Chair has sufficient scope to ensure institutions that have to investigate non-compliance with Section 13A of the Pension Fund by local government municipalities and private companies to effectively address challenges in the interest of the workers. Thank you very much, Chair. May I stop there?
Thank you, Honorable Talega. I invite the Honorable Van Rooyen.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Madume Kobotri. MK Party is extremely grateful for this opportunity to participate in this debate. We noted the reform introduced to the South African retirement system, which of course is allowing members to make partial withdrawal from their savings. The two-pot system main objective is to help fund members in financial distress. I must indicate, Honorable Chairperson, that it's our submission, SNK, that to a certain extent, if utilized sparingly, these withdrawals can be of help. But this amount can be viewed as the panacea of the financial distress masses of our people. This situation is further, Chairperson, exacerbated by the high levels of financial illiteracy within our people. We view it as a short-term intervention, far from addressing the deep-rooted socio-economic challenges daily encountered by South Africans. Honorable Chairperson, it is a well-established fact that majority of South Africans are financially distressed as a result of wrong economic policy choices made before and post-1994. The apartheid created neoliberal policies choices made before and post-1994 are currently championed by the DA-led coalition, failed dismally to tamper with the apartheid economy structure, which left the ownership of the country's economy in the hands of the few at the expense of its people. It is our assertion as MK Party that for us to deal with this appalling and distressful financial status of our people, we need to radically transform the structure of South Africa economy. Measures like the two-pot system are not even an attempt to scratch on the surface of real problems facing our people. We shouldn't allow our focus to be distracted from the bigger picture or the elephant in the room. We must take full control of the country economy for the benefit of the majority and not few families and their friends. Chairperson, as correctly asserted by previous speakers, it is wrong for institutions and businesses to collect money from workers' salaries and fail to pay it over to their pension savings. Hence, as MK Party, we went an extra mile after establishing that there are those institutions and businesses that fail to comply with the Pension Fund Act. We went further as MK Party to establish what might be the root cause of this non-compliance. After some engagement with some of these stakeholders, we made the following preliminary establishment. Municipalities cited insufficient income to cater for their contribution portion because subsequently this delayed them or made them to fail to pay over workers' contributions. We established that there were dubious pension funds, practitioners, and schemes, but also we established that there were dubious security company pension fund management systems. We also engaged with the Association of Private Security Owners of South Africa, TAPSOSA. This association is mainly representing Black private security companies. And they cited that their biggest problem is that government, as the procurer of their services, is severely underpaying them. And all the departments that procure their services are not paying them regulated prices, adversely impacting on their income. Now, Chairperson, MK Party is of the view that non-compliance of institutions and businesses with Section 13A of Pension Fund Act is just a signal of deeply entrenched challenges embedded in our country's financial system that need to be thoroughly comprehended and untangled by us as lawmakers and by us as the last hope of our people. This situation should not just be treated as a law enforcement process, Chairperson, but more of a learning curve to be used to address our beloved country development challenges. Chairperson, it's our take as MK Party that establishing an ad hoc committee will serve as an appropriate platform to collate various stakeholders' experiences for proper planning and execution of our daunting mandate as public representatives. We are aware that there is insistence that we should stick to the Finance Committee to deal with this matter. But I can tell you, Chairperson, the stories that we heard after we reached out to various role players justify the call by EFF that we should establish this committee, because we think this committee will accord us the much needed space for us to dissect exactly what might be the problems in engulfing municipalities, what might be the problems engulfing security companies not to pay over workers' contributions to the pension fund. We submit as MK Party that the establishment of this ad hoc committee will go a long way in ensuring that we succeed in getting to the details of this problem. Ke a leboga, Chairperson.
Ra leboga, Honorable Van Rooyen. We invite the Honorable Van Zyl.
Thank you, House Chair. Today we gathered to address a matter that deeply impacts the future of thousands of hardworking South Africans. The failure of some employers in both private and government sectors to comply with Section 13A of the Pension Funds Act. This critical section mandates that employers transfer employee pension contributions promptly, safeguarding the retirement security of employees who have devoted years to building this nation. Every pension lost or withheld is not only a financial loss, but also a breach of trust that no South African should have to endure. As we debate whether to establish an ad hoc committee to investigate these violations, I urge us to consider an alternative approach, one that builds upon our existing oversight structures and institutions. While a new committee may offer a focused short-term investigation, a sustainable, comprehensive approach leveraging the capacities of our current institutions is far more effective. Among these institutions are the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, the Auditor General, the Public Protector, and the Pension Fund Adjudicator, all of which are well positioned to address this issue. The FSCA, as the primary regulator of pension funds, plays an essential role in monitoring compliance, investigating irregularities, and imposing sanctions on non-compliant employers. The FSCA regularly assesses pension contributions and can penalize employers who fail to meet the obligation. By enhancing collaboration between the FSCA and parliamentary committees, we can strengthen the regulatory framework, ensuring that its oversight activities are both supported and transparent. This approach enhances accountability and enforcement without adding unnecessary administrative burdens. To further protect workers, we should also leverage the role of the pension fund adjudicator. The adjudicator's office provides an accessible platform for employees to report grievances regarding pension contributions. It has the authority to investigate and make binding rulings on disputes related to pension fund administration, including employer non-compliance. By promoting greater awareness of the adjudicator's services and encouraging workers to utilize this avenue for redress, we empower employees directly and support a system of accountability at the individual level. While private sector non-compliance often draws attention, we must also address similar issues within the government sector. Municipalities and government departments have defaulted on pension contributions, leaving public employees uncertain about their financial futures. This breach of trust is unacceptable. The Auditor General and the Public Protector's offices play vital roles in overseeing compliance within the public sector. The Auditor General's regular reports have highlighted non-compliance in pension contributions, providing a foundation for investigation and corrective action. Meanwhile, the Public Protector can investigate individual cases where employees' pension rights are compromised. Leveraging these established channels enhances accountability and ensures swift responses to non-compliance. Non-compliance in pension contributions must be viewed as a serious offence. Establishing specialised units within the South African Police Service focused on financial crimes would ensure that cases of pension funds are investigated thoroughly and that violators face appropriate legal consequences. Additionally, empowering municipal public accounts committees to monitor compliance and working with the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs to enforce compliance in defaulting municipalities enhances local accountability. COPTA could establish task forces to monitor municipal compliance, ensuring that government sector obligations are met and setting a strong example for all employers. For the FSCA to effectively carry out its mandate, it requires adequate resources. Increasing support to the FSCA would support more frequent, comprehensive audits, allowing the agency to address non-compliance proactively. We should also consider expanding the FSCA's authority to impose higher fines on non-compliant employers, reinforcing the seriousness of pension obligations. The recent reforms, such as the two-pot pension system, aim to make retirement saving more accessible and secure. However, implementation of this has highlighted the non-compliance of employers, both in the private and government sectors, when paying over contributions to the pension funds. Let us not forget that pensions are not merely financial transactions. They are the culmination of years of work and sacrifice. Every pension lost, withheld, or mismanaged represents a stolen promise to our citizens. Strengthening employee accountability through clearer laws and stricter penalties ensure that South African pension systems serve and protect all employees as intended. Honourable members, creating an ad hoc committee may provide temporary attention to the issue, but a lasting solution lies in strengthening the systems we already have in place. By empowering institutions like the FSCA, the Auditor General, the Public Protector, and the Pension Fund Adjudicator, we build a framework that ensures that all employers fulfill their pension obligations, providing sustainable security for South Africans. In closing, I urge this House to enhance the existing structures rather than creating a new committee. This approach is cost-effective, it maximizes our resources, and builds a future where workers' financial security is guaranteed. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I invite the Honourable Member from EFF. Honourable Member from the EFF.
Speaker, I'll be utilizing the time in closing. We would advise.
Noted, Honourable Thambo. I now invite the Honourable Khadebe.
Thank you so much, Honourable Chairperson. The current mechanisms in place for ensuring compliance with Section 13A of the Pension Fund Act are comprehensive and effective, instilling confidence that existing frameworks address the challenges experienced both in local government and by some private security companies. Section 13A of Pension Fund Act, which mandates timely payment of pension fund contributions by employers, remains a critical regulation for the financial well-being of employees. Both the Department of Labor and the Pension Fund Adjudicator actively address compliance concerns through established processes, and the FSCA continues to play a vital role in oversight and enforcement. The FSCA has powers to open a criminal case against non-compliant employers. This on its own tells us that there is viable mechanisms to ensure compliance. Another critical entity is the Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority, which is mandated to promote the protection and enforcement of the rights of security officers. I am mentioning these role players so that it can be clear that they are suitably established institutions to sustainably ensure compliance to Section 13A of Pension Fund Act. It is essential to recognize the progress made through these institutions' effort to ensure the Section 13A compliance, notably through rigorous audits, investigations, and punitive measures for violators. These mechanisms not only protect employees' rights, but also foster a culture of responsibility among employers. The establishment of an ad hoc committee, however, risks duplicating efforts and may divert resources from more sustainable compliance initiatives. As the IFP, we believe that focusing on long-term systematic improvements to existing compliance frameworks will be more effective in achieving lasting adherence. It is therefore our call that we must strengthen interagency collaboration and enhancing compliance monitoring modalities to ensure sustained enforcement of Section 13A by bolstering existing channels for monitoring and reporting. We can support a streamlined approach that avoid redundant and administrative structures. Honorable Chairperson, we therefore strongly do not we strongly oppose the formation of the ad hoc committee. In rejecting this draft resolution, the IFP calls for stronger oversight both in local government and in private security companies and the regular reporting by concerned parties. The IFP rejects the draft resolution. Honorable Chairperson, I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Hadebe. I invite the Honorable Member from the Patriotic Alliance. Honorable Member from the PA. Honorable Member, PA. We move. I invite the Honorable Dana.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Voorsitter, wanneer 'n werkgewer pensioen of mediese fonds of enige ander derde party aftrekkings van 'n werknemer se salaris aftrek en dit nie aan die betrokke derde party fonds oorbetaal nie, steel daardie werkgewer van sy eie werknemer. Dis so eenvoudig soos dit. And municipalities are one of the biggest culprits when it comes to this. One example, the municipality of Mafube in the Free State that serves the towns of Frankfurt, Cornelia, Tweeling and Villiers has had its bank accounts frozen after a legal process by the Municipal Workers Pension Fund because it has not paid over third-party contributions for more than 5 years.
Honorable Member,
so people are concerned we are going to see an escalation in the...
Honorable Diale from the EFF, may you mute? Apologies, Honorable Dana. You may continue.
Thank you, Chair. There are employees who have been working for this municipality for more than 30 years, who have diligently contributed to their pension funds to have a worthy retirement where they can rest with dignity, knowing that they've worked for it, who cannot retire now because the municipality not only stole their contributions, which is what happened in effect, but it also stole their retirement. And the same is true for their medical aid benefits, unfortunately.
Die EFF is heeltemal reg om hierdie aan die groot klok te hang, voorsitter, want dit gebeur nie net in Mafube nie. Dit gebeur in verskeie munisipaliteite en ook in ander entiteite van die staat en selfs in privaat besighede. Dis 'n geweldige probleem en 'n grove skending van werknemers se sekuriteit deur hulle van broodnodige lewensmiddels op hulle ou dag te ontneem. Dis onaanvaarbaar. Maar ewe onaanvaarbaar is die feit dat die departement van samewerkende regering op beide provinsiale en nasionale vlak bloot hulle skouers optrek wanneer dit kom by sulke warm patat probleme. Dan is hierdie departement baie vinnig om te sê dat hulle nie werklik by plaaslike regering kan inmeng nie. Ek praat uit persoonlike ondervinding, want ek het byvoorbeeld die Mafube probleem al verskeie kere met hierdie twee departemente op beide vlakke opgeneem. It cannot be that the provincial or national department can merely wash its hands of accountability when a municipality does not comply with Section 13A of the Pension Funds Act. Our municipalities are in disarray, and this is criminal. We need action now. And aside from Kochta, National Treasury's Municipal Support Division can play a pivotal role in addressing this problem, which gives the Standing Committee on Finances the right of oversight over this specific matter. Much has been said about the private security sector, and it's true. The private security sector provident fund is in a state of disarray and has to recover millions from employers in the private security sector who deducted but didn't pay their employees' contributions to the fund, which has compulsory membership in the industry. The legislation, Honourable Chair, is there. But just like the Department of Cooperative Governance and Treasury, the boards of trustees of these funds have not done enough to bring these employers to book. Voorsitter, dis nie nodig om ondersoek in te stel na hierdie entiteite nie. Dis nie nodig om 'n ad hoc komitee op te rig nie. Dis duidelik of jy betaal jou derde party aftrekkings of nie. Die oorsaak is duidelik. En as jy dit nie doen nie, moet daar daadwerklik opgetree word. Die liggame wat moet optree, tesame met die oortredende werkgewer, moet dan verantwoordbaar gehou word. Maar verantwoordbaarheid in Suid-Afrika is ongelukkig iets wat ons steeds ontbreek. En dit moet ook aangespreek word. Dit kan ook deur die bestaande meganismes en deur die bestaande wetgewing, solank die wil om dit te doen nie ontbreek nie. Dankie.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I invite the Honourable Member from Action SA.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take off my video because I believe in the last session my video disturbed the audio. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take it off and then start speaking. Thank you, Chair.
You can do that, Honourable Member.
Honourable Chairperson and members, Action SA support Honourable Thambo's proposal if it's an honest endeavour to find the truth and hold those responsible for non-payment to account. The skipper's judgment about recouping misappropriated funds must be implemented. Honestly, Honourable Chair, the National ANC GNU Grand Coalition is boring. We've never seen a government that must be begged to prioritize its citizens. We cannot afford another Zondo Commission scenario that's been swept under the carpet. These organizations make deductions from unsuspecting staff and then don't pay them back, which is essentially misrepresentation at best and theft at worst, leaving the victims bereft in times of need with no recourse. As a party, Action SA committed to being constructive members of Parliament, we firmly support the draft resolution tabled by Mr. S Thambo for establishing an ad hoc committee to investigate the non-compliance of certain local government municipalities and private security companies with Section 13A of the Pensions Fund Act, Act 114 of 1956. To that end, this resolution aligns with our party's unwavering commitment to upholding the principles of accountability, transparency, and justice in governance and private sector operations. Section 13A of the Pensions Fund Act mandates employers to make timely contribution to pension funds. Failure to do so jeopardizes the financial security and dignity of employees, particularly those who have given years of dedicated service to municipalities and private security companies. Reports of mismanaged, withheld, or unpaid pension funds are a gross violation of workers' rights and an effort to the ethical principles enshrined in our Constitution. Municipalities are entrusted with safeguarding public funds, yet some have failed their employees by neglecting their fiduciary duties. Private security companies, often operating on compliance margins, further exacerbate the problem by exploiting low-wage workers who rely on their pensions as a safety net for retirement. These practices are unacceptable and require urgent and thorough investigation. The violation of Section 13A has severe ramifications. Number one, financial precarity. Workers are deprived of financial security they were promised, leaving them vulnerable in their latter years. Non-compliance undermines trust in both public and private institutions, weakening the social contract. The failure to adhere to pension fund contributions constitutes a breach of the law and calls into question the accountability mechanisms within these entities. Action SA believes that the establishment of an ad hoc committee is the most effective mechanism to identify municipalities and private security companies that have failed to meet their obligations under Section 13A. We recommend that legal and financial penalties for entities violating the Act be meted out, to provide actionable solution to strengthen compliance and safeguard workers' pensions, and finally, to advocate for immediate measures to ensure that affected employees receive what is rightfully theirs. We urge all members of Parliament to support this resolution. Failure to address this issue perpetuates systemic injustices against workers and undermines the integrity of our institutions. South Africa cannot afford to allow citizens' hard-earned pensions to be squandered due to negligence and corruption. Action SA remains steadfast in its mission to ensure that ethical leadership and to champion the rights of all South Africans. Let us act decisively and collaboratively to resolve and restore justice and protect the future of our workers, irrespective of the color of our T-shirts. I thank you, Chairperson and honorable members.
Thank you, Honorable Ngobeni. I now invite the Honorable Thring.
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson. The ACDP asserts that the violations of Section 13A of the Pension Funds Act by some municipalities and private security companies is a call for stricter enforcement and accountability measures to protect workers' rights. These violations are numerous, starting with the failure to pay contributions despite deducting these amounts from employee salaries, leaving workers without the pension benefits to which they are entitled. Not surprisingly, there have been instances where the deducted funds were misappropriated or used for purposes other than the intended pension contributions. This is theft and corruption, which leaves the honest hard worker destitute and dependent on the state. The resultant financial losses for the affected employees and non-compliance through lack of reporting contributions has made it difficult to track and rectify non-payment issues, with latest reports showing multitudes of municipalities and private security companies which are now involved in this fraudulent activity. Violations of Section 13A should lead to severe penalties, including fines of up to 10 million and/or imprisonment for up to 10 years for responsible parties, though there is little to find of or much more than employees being instructed to make up the contributions. This is evident of an appalling lack of interest, ethics, and zero empathy for employees. The victims face financial hardship, loss of retirement savings, legal battles, stress, and eroded trust in employees and the pension system. The ACDP concurs absolutely that there is a need for the strictest enforcement to protect employees' future financial security. Investigating pension fund violations would offer expert insights into a focused inquiry and targeted reform recommendations. This approach thorough investigation, and not just of municipalities and security companies. It will encourage government transparency and present effective policy changes to prevent future violations. In supporting the call for an ad hoc committee, the ACDP additionally calls for public awareness campaigns to ensure employees fulfill their obligations and protect employees' retirement savings, encourages workers to check payslips for deductions, and if any fraud is detected, a group of affected employees should pursue a class action against delinquent municipalities, security companies, and any other companies found guilty of this fraud and corruption. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Thring. We now invite the Honorable UDM. Honorable member from the UDM. We now invite the Honorable Ghana. Honorable Ghana. We now invite the Honorable ATM. The Honorable member from the ATM. We now invite the Honorable Sekwati. Honorable member Sekwati.
Thank you, Chairperson. Allow me as well to participate in this important motion, which tries an attempt to look at the measures that can be deployed to deal with the issues of the pension funds. And Chair, first and foremost, I would like to say that this actually shows us the agency to tackle local government financial sustainability and to effectively address the problem of municipalities which are found to be non-compliant with Section 13A of the Pension Fund Act. The government needs to accelerate the process of reforming the local government funding model. It is common cause, Chair, that we do have municipalities which are located in rural and peri-urban areas which are confronted by high levels of unemployment and economic growth. The implication of this condition is having existence of municipalities which we can deem to be less viable in having the adequate capacity and capability to meet the needs of the people. This is also due to the assumption of the white paper on local government, which assumed that all municipalities will be able to generate sufficient revenue. We welcome the commitment by the President in his address in opening of the Parliament to prioritize increasing funding for local government and reviewing the funding model. In the main, municipalities which face challenges of non-compliance with Section 13A of the Pension Funds Act are due to their financial position, but there are circumstances of poor management which result in financial mismanagement. Through the strengthening of financial management capabilities in local government, we can address this problem through prudent financial management, and where cash flow challenges arise, there are various interventions which municipality can seek in order to ensure it obliges with its financial duties. In the private sector, some business owners and managers misuse business funds and face cash challenges which result in non-compliance with Section 13A of the Pension Funds Act. Poor trading conditions due to exposure to the global political and economic climate also have an impact on the financial sustainability of business operations. Poor financial status due to poor financial management systems and controls also causes non-compliance. Such companies retrenches or file for business rescue processes, signaling financial and business challenges. It's critical that workers in the private sector join unions to be active not only in ensuring that their employees pay for their pension fund contribution, but also ensuring that many workers are included in the pension fund system. And this is fundamental to ensure the well-being of all workers is actually protected. The pension fund system is a critical component of the financial sector. The pension fund contributes significant capital to the economy of both public and private sector capital investment. We need to always find the pension system as a major source of the development of our country and the protection of the well-being of our workers. Through Regulation 28 of the Pension Act, asset allocation is determined for optimal value creation and support for national development objectives. The opposition party has not made a compelling argument, Chairperson, on the impact of the establishment of an ad hoc committee to investigate some of the local government municipalities and private companies found in violation of Section 13A of the Pension Funds Act. The current existing mechanisms have sufficient data that the motion seeks to attain. We have also agreed in the committee as the ANC to ensure we receive comprehensive reports from the competent institutions such as the Office of the Pension Fund Adjudicator and the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, whom the Financing Standing Committee has also reiterated the decision of the committee, and its warrant, and if warranted, can also meet stakeholders to further address the gaps. We believe this motion of the EFF is not only done in good faith and recognizing decisions taken by the Finance Standing Committee. We agree that this is a critical matter which should be addressed so as to reduce the rates of non-compliance with Section 13A of the Pension Funds Act. We don't believe our committee is an effective way to reach the objective. The ANC remains committed to the workers' struggle and will always advance protection of the workers' rights. And Chairperson, as my last word is that the action that the EFF is attempting to take in terms of, in the direction in terms of setting up an ad hoc committee can only open a risk to this pension funds due to the extortion activities that we have in the country. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Squati. I invite the Honorable Member from the NCC. Honorable Member from the NCC. I invite the Honorable Member from the PAC. Honorable Member from the PAC. I invite the Honorable Member from UAT. Honorable Member from the UAT. I invite the Honorable Member from Good. Honorable Member from Good. I invite the Honorable Alexandra.
Thank you, Speaker. Honorable Chair, since the introduction of the two-pot retirement system in South Africa in September this year, there has been a significant interest in early withdrawals. By the third day of its implementation, SARS had processed tax directives of over 2,000 withdrawal requests, totaling about 103 million rand in value, suggesting a robust initial response. This new system, which splits retirement funding into accessible and preservable portions, aims to balance the access to funding for emergencies alongside long-term preservation to ensure financial security. The implementation of the two-pot system has brought attention to the issue of employers failing to remit pension contributions on behalf of the employees. As workers apply for withdrawal from the two-pot systems, they are discovering that their available balance is lower than expected. The shortfall often stems from employers not transferring employee contributions to the pension fund. It is a long-standing issue in South Africa. This is unacceptable and affects people negatively. It deprives employees of the financial security they expect and deserve upon retirement. In such cases, the member of the public, specifically employees, have several options: to file a complaint with their pension fund themselves or to report the issue to the Financial Sector's Conduct Authority. While the FSCA has faced criticism over the handling of the cases where employees are failing to make pension fund contributions on behalf of the employees, under the South African law, it's the employer's responsibility to deduct pension contributions from employee salary and to ensure that these funds are transferred over to the pension fund. When companies default, this can lead to serious implications for employees' financial security, especially in the context of the new two-pot retirement system. If an individual is not getting the satisfaction that they need from either the FCSA or their pension fund, they have further access to several ombudsman services which serve different aspects of the pension-related complaints. The primary ombudsman options include the pension fund adjudicator, which addresses issues like non-payment of contribution by employers. This is a no-cost independent service specifically dedicated to handling pension-related complaints. And there's also the tax ombuds. If the tax-related issue with pension fund contributions, such as incorrect tax deductions or delays in tax refunds on retirement fund benefits. While the intention behind creating an ad hoc committee may be good, it is important to avoid unnecessary layering of bureaucracy that can slow down or complicate the resolution of the pension-related violation. The existing of the ombud services like the pension fund adjudicator provides specialized and a non-cost avenue for employees to seek advice. The evidence around employers not paying over pension fund contribution undermines the trust between the employer and the employee, which is totally unacceptable. We thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Alexandra. I invite the Honorable Dr. Maswanganyi. The Honorable Dr. Maswanganyi.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Ndikhenselile mtsamashitulu ndihosha lava ku hoxa xandla eka njhekanjhekisano lowu. I will switch off my video because I've got a poor network here. Thanks. The retirement funding system has been in place for a long time and has an estimated body of legislation governing it, principally codified in the Pension Funds Act promulgated in 1956 and the Revenue Laws Amendment Act 2024. The Pension Funds Act has been amended several times, but a number of South African commissions have investigated various factors of retirement funding and made consequential findings. They include, with varying emphasis, the Mouton Commission of 1992, the Katz Commission of 1995, the Smith Commission of 1995,
The Honorable Doctor, I think you have muted yourself. Honorable members, am I the only one who's unable to hear Dr. Maswanganyi?
You are not the only one, Chair. Okay. I think he has muted himself.
Honorable Whip of the ANC, may you assist to get another member to proceed. The Honorable Doctor had indicated that his network is unstable. Honorable Sukwati and an Honorable Duty Whip.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You can continue.
Yes, Chair. Can I try and take over from Honorable Maswanganyi?
I'm back. Well, I'm back, yeah.
Okay. Continue, Honorable Doctor.
Okay, sorry for that. There's terrible network here at Laporia. Let me try to gallop. The recommendations of these committees and commissions have taken into account in formulating policy documents and may be expressed in more detailed legislative and regulatory reforms. This history is critical to locate the establishment of the pension fund adjudicator, which has a particular mandate to serve as an important and impartial independent arbiter, aiding in the resolution of disputes between pension fund members and pension funds. In the context of ongoing financial sector reforms, the pension fund adjudicator plays a crucial role in protecting the rights of pension fund members. To answer the question whether we require an ad hoc committee to investigate some local government, municipalities, and private companies found in violation of Section 13A of the Pension Fund Act, it is important to point out that the Mouton Committee recommended the establishment of an ombudsman for retirement funds because the Pension Funds Act did not make provision for the Financial Services Board at the time to settle dispute between pension fund members and their pension funds. The pension fund adjudicator and the FSCA have the legal duty and technical capabilities to address challenges of non-compliance with Section 13A of the pension fund. Let me indicate, moving towards the conclusion, that the adjudicator, the pension fund adjudicator, has effectively responded to complaints of non-compliance from municipal workers. And I will also highlight a few examples of the effectiveness of the pension fund adjudicator. The pension fund adjudicator is busy with the cases of Masilonyana local municipality, Tuhuluho local municipality, Dr. Bears Node local municipality, and many other employers who have been reported to the pension fund adjudicator. Let me indicate, Honorable Chairperson, that between the 19th and the 21st of August, as the standing committee, we met with all the entities that report to the Standing Committee Finance or to Parliament. And amongst them, it is the FSCA and the Pension Fund adjudicator. We have agreed that the two institutions, that is the FSCA and the Pension Fund adjudicators, should go and investigate cases that have been reported to them, because other aggrieved members of pension fund were even approaching Parliament. We delegated these two institutions, because it is their responsibility, to investigate those challenges, and they are doing so. We have agreed as the Standing Committee Finance that when we come back after next week, on the 26th of November, we are going to meet the FSCA and the Pension Fund adjudicator to give the committee a comprehensive report how they will have investigated the complaints from different employees, and what are the actions or the sanctions that they are going to take against the defaulters. We are not against the motion of Honorable Thambo because he's from the opposition. Honorable Thambo is a member of the Standing Committee Finance. And when we met these two agencies before, I think he was there. And when we took the decision that the two institutions will go and investigate and report back, he was there. If he was not there, Honorable Mautwe, who's a full member, will have reported to him. We believe, Honorable Chairperson, that Parliament should not work in competition with institutions that support democracy and organs of state, but instead, the relationship should be mutual. It will be a mockery of constitutional democracy for Parliament to usurp the powers of the state organs that report to it. Let us allow the Pension Fund adjudicator and the FSCA to conduct independent investigations, take necessary actions, and report back to Parliament. Chairperson, the ANC does not support this motion as a result of what I've motivated here. That can so much to.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I invite the Honorable Thambo.
Thank you, Chair. I think from the onset, I don't think there's any necessity for me to respond to people asserting their history as shop stewards. I'm not sure what value that adds in this conversation, but I think
Honorable Thambo, your network is quite very poor. May you be in a place where you will be able to connect.
broadly, I find it quite disturbing of national unity seem to have committed themselves. Can you hear me now, Chair?
We are
Chair
losing.
President?
We can hear a bit, but we are losing you.
Can you hear me now, Chair?
Now we can hear you. Continue.
Thank you. Yes, as I was saying, I find it quite disturbing that the political parties that belong to the government of national unity have committed themselves to a delusion of the functionality of mechanisms and existing regulatory authorities, even when they are confronted by objective reality. And this is not the first time that this is happening, particularly in this term. And there's a commitment to avoid transparency, even though the Parliament of South Africa is an oversight authority that must intervene when entities fail. So when authorities and regulatory authorities such as the Financial Sector Conduct Authority and the Pension Funds Adjudicator are reaffirmed as effective, even though there's a report that clearly states that there are defaulters and delinquent private security companies and local government municipalities who've been delinquent for almost 2 decades. And there is an insistence that we must still place faith into these institutions. I think that must be regarded as a form of delusion, because I'm not sure whether it's an avoidance of accountability and intervention because there's complicity by certain people or political parties in these crimes, or it's just pure delusion and refusing to accept objective reality when it confronts you, like cognitive dissonance, like we're presenting you with objective evidence that these institutions are failing. Families are destitute, workers have died fighting for their monies, and yet you still insist that we must reaffirm the authority of institutions that are failing. The intervention of an ad hoc committee is precisely because the institutions that have been tasked with the regulatory authority to ensure that workers' rights protected have failed. But this objective evidence is clearly not registering in the minds of those who want to avoid transparency and avoid doing their work. So I think that's the first point I want to make. The Honorable Khatebe says that they reject, from the IFP, they reject the proposal for the ad hoc committee because we must continue to place faith in these institutions. And of course, he says there must be more oversight on municipalities. This is ironic because COGTA is run by an IFP minister. So I'm not sure the call to exercise stronger oversight over municipalities, who the IFP is making it to, because it's a ministry that they preside over. And we have written to the Minister of COGTA, Velinkosi Hlabisa, to intervene in this matter, and they spoke empty platitudes in the same way that Dr. Masonganye is making that, and I think it's more revealing and telling that they made an agreement in August. We're entering December now, anytime soon, and it reveals the lack of the sense of urgency on workers' rights and the violations of workers' rights and the theft of their money that is being exhibited by political parties who are presiding over municipalities which are delinquent, and in some instances providing contracts from state-owned entities and government departments to delinquent private security companies. Because that is the conclusion that we must be allowed to make. I mean, I'm not sure why there's an avoidance to establish an ad hoc committee as if the institutions that are tasked with these responsibilities are effective. And the Honorable Sikwati talks about the EFF not making a good faith proposal in the form of the ad hoc committee because the Standing Committee on Finance has made some agreement in the same way that Dr. Masonganye has made. You are exhibiting the same incompetence that these institutions that you are reaffirming has exhibited. It's almost 3 months now. You haven't summoned these institutions. And I want to give you an assurance that some of us have met with the Financial Sector Conduct Authority before. They are going to tell you that their sole capacity, which they have been doing over the past 2 or 3 years, is publishing the list of delinquent companies, and they leave it there. There's a broken telephone, and that's what we were making in the introduction here, that there's the administration and bureaucracy that you think you're avoiding by not establishing an ad hoc committee is exactly what is ensuring that these companies and municipalities escape with their delinquents, because there's so many hurdles for workers to jump over in order for them to get justice that they end up dying without getting their money. You go to the pension fund adjudicator, your thing rots there with her. You go to the public protector, your matter rots there. You go to the ombudsman, your matter rots there. Because you go to the CCMA, you go through your bargaining council. You've established so many mechanisms to resolve what is a simple process. And that is a very administrative process that this ad hoc committee seeks to address. If anyone bothered to read the motion, they would see that we're proposing as well an entire revamp of the pension fund sector. And I would have thought that there would be a contribution that would sort of realize that specifically in municipalities, there's the existence of so many administrators of separate municipal pension funds is an obstacle and feeds into the corruption that exists. And as the EFF, we also want to perhaps propose, because if people can think through this further rather than reaffirming failed institutions, that perhaps we must reimagine and create a state-owned asset management company that is going to have an investment mandate to develop municipal infrastructure, where we center the pensions of municipal workers in one place, because the numerous pension fund administrators, the numerous pension funds that exist are part and parcel of the problem. You've created so many regulatory authorities, you've allowed the existence of so many pension funds and pension fund administrators who conduct investment willy-nilly without any developmental mandate towards the municipalities that they preside over. That this is what feeds into the corruption and feeds into the theft of workers' monies. So I think that is the point we want to make. It is quite delusional to keep on reaffirming failed institutions. And we hope that all political parties will come to this realization and truly prioritize workers' interests and not keep on stating empty platitudes that things are going to happen by institutions that have failed to make things happen in the first place. We're here now because the FSCA has failed. We're here now because CIRA has failed with its regulatory obligations. We're here now because the pension funds adjudicator has failed. We're here now because Treasury failed to listen when we raised the alarm in January. And now because the two-part system is in place and there's a general panic, everyone wants to act as if they've been concerned about this matter in a general manner. So thank you, Chairperson. I think we accept and we congratulate and welcome the support from Action SA and from Mkondo Wesizwe, and perhaps, and we hope that rationality will prevail moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. That concludes the debate and the business for this virtual mini-plenary session. The mini-plenary will now rise.
Malubongo.